A driverless car to take you anywhere you want to go.
It's just kind of surreal.
It's like something out of a science fiction movie.
See no driver in there.
But on the streets of San Francisco, it is very real and a very viral reality. Some companies will drive, others will stall. How did we get here? Where will the autonomous vehicle industry go? We found out as we explore a driverless tomorrow. Just when things were on the move, a hard stop. In 2023, San Francisco became the first and only place in the world to have two driverless robotaxi companies operating on city streets: Alphabet's Waymo and General Motors' Cruise. Cruise had ambitious plans to speed AV access across the United States.
In addition to San Francisco, Phoenix, Austin, we're now testing driverless in Houston, and we're about to start supervised in Dallas, Miami, Nashville, Atlanta, Charlotte, Raleigh.
There's another one, and then going the other way. Driverless car. The future's here.
I've also felt really safe in these cars because they're equipped with sensors to react to things that human drivers wouldn't necessarily be able to. And if you've ever been in San Francisco, you know how hilly these streets are and how unpredictable they can be.
So where did Cruise come from? Kyle Vogt is a serial entrepreneur who founded video live streaming service Twitch in 2011 before he started Cruise in 2013.
And out of that first Y Combinator batch came startups that continue to touch hundreds of millions of people.
It's important to note, actually, as a part of Cruise's story, that they were in the winter 2014 class of Y Combinator, which is probably San Francisco's most famous incubator, right? You do this kind of multi-month crash course in how to start a company with a bit of seed money, and then Y Combinator helps you find some more investors. And Cruise is one of Y Combinator's success stories.
3 years later, Cruise was acquired by General Motors to boost their autonomous driving efforts.
GM, General Motors, acquired them in 2016. The financial terms weren't disclosed, but at the time it was reported to be $1 billion deal.
GM installed its then president, Dan Ammann, as Cruise's new CEO.
Because we are close, very close, to offering our first driverless rides to passengers on the streets of San Francisco.
The story kind of became Dan Ammann wanting to do things his way autonomously from GM. He would ultimately end up resigning in December of 2021. Dan Ammann was the face of the unveil of the Origin, and this is a big part of the technology story, that Cruise ultimately wanted to pursue an end goal of a purposely designed autonomous shuttle with no steering wheel, no pedals, inward-facing seats, a boxy looking thing with sensors around the outside, and that would be the kind of hardware or vehicle side of this future, which he saw as being a $1 trillion addressable market for autonomous robotaxis.
About to do my first driverless ride ever in San Francisco. Typing in an address, requesting a car. I'm being matched right now. I got matched with Sourdough. Sourdough is car number 1 here today.
Vogt took over as CEO in 2021, and under his leadership, he made bold, accelerated plans to commercialize Cruise. In 2022, we got a glimpse of an autonomous future becoming reality. By June, Cruise was the first company granted a permit to offer paid driverless rides to the public. It was limited to a small, select group of riders and only in certain parts of San Francisco at nighttime. But by the end of that year, their cars were allowed on most of San Francisco's streets. That's when we got to take our first ride in a Cruise car.
Here's the goods, my son. He is ready to try Cruise to see how it's going. Here it is, yay.
That's so weird. That's just a robot.
Oh. Okay, didn't get us to the address where we wanted to, but that's okay. Woo!
We're on our way.
Look at the steering wheel. Look at the steering wheel. It's freaky.
Because obviously I've heard about the idea of self-driverless cars for years. Google's been developing it since I was in middle school, but it's weird to actually see it now.
It doesn't scare you that there's nobody there?
No. He drives better than me.
How about your dad?
Better than Dad? I'll say more.
Terribly.
I'll say less recklessly.
Mo El-Shanawi, Cruise's head of engineering, explains how the car sees.
This is our anechoic chambers, one of many hardware labs that we test our own technology in, which we develop right here in San Francisco. That's very excited about. So,
And it's to test radar.
this is to test radars, yes. So this is one of many sensors that we have on our self-driving cars. So we have multiple sensing modalities. So the radar is radio based, which is like, it's basically radio detection and ranging, and it uses radio waves to detect all the objects around it.
This is what you see, and this is what the car sees. The car uses multiple sensors to see, including radar, LiDAR, and 360-degree computer vision. Cameras located around the car see hundreds of feet ahead and around double-parked cars. Together, the technology allows the vehicle to make split-second decisions. The car uses AI, artificial intelligence, to predict multiple paths forward every second. All the technology is developed in-house in San Francisco.
It's very useful to know if the car's coming up from a very far distance. Even in fog, it really provides our AV with something beyond the vision and the LiDARs and many other sensors which our AVs have. So these are the different compute systems. So think of compute system as the brains of the car. As all these sensing modalities or all the information about the world comes in, now you need to start like predicting what's about to happen on the road, and then with all these predictions happening multiple times per second, what's your best trajectory?
It follows the handbook of driving to a T, but I just don't think a lot of young people want to support this technology. I was just talking about it with two friends, and both of them were like, yeah, just AI in general scares me, and I think it's mostly the loss of jobs.
It was a driverless dream that became a reality. But dramatically, almost overnight, the whole company came to a screeching halt. As robotaxi companies ramped up, they turned their attention towards making money. Developing the AVs cost billions of dollars over many years, so getting a return on that investment was critical. But getting people to pay fares raised concerns about the economic impact these robotaxis would have on human drivers.
You know, I think initially there was a lot of excitement. Perhaps the first excitement was about this idea that we would have robot taxis. A lot of that has cooled, and I'd say that now there's more focus on trucking and niche applications of autonomy, like operating ports, operating mining equipment, operating farm equipment. So the idea that these companies had they were going to come in and change everything with robotaxis has generally proved to be very arduous. I'm not going to say it's never going to happen. We see it happening on the streets of San Francisco. But to do that at widespread scale across the country is really going to be a monumental effort.
The ability to charge the public for rides was in the hands of the California Public Utilities Commission. The CPUC threw lighter fluid on the debate when it drafted authorization for both Cruise and Waymo to collect fares for their services.
I'd say it's naturally hard for regulation to keep pace with innovation, especially when we're at this time where innovation's happening faster and faster as companies like Intel and NVIDIA create faster compute. That's changing by the year. It's amazing to see, but it's making it even more difficult for regulators to keep up with innovation, particularly in the self-driving area.
To some, the cars seemed unreliable, driving erratically, stalling, and blocking traffic. And much of that behavior was not being reported to regulators. San Francisco authorities had asked the two companies to reveal the data that tracked these problems. Cruise and Waymo's responses were vague and non-committal.
No, we're not opposed to reporting any minimal risk conditions. We just think there's some that the agency, the CPUC Commission is actually trying to get at. Not every, like I mentioned, MRC leaks a noteworthy event. Sometimes it's a, what does he say, a nothing burger. So I feel reporting that type of data would be beneficial, but we aren't opposed to reporting MRCs that are noteworthy and worth reporting.
Respectfully, I want to suggest that what may be an incident that is a nothing burger to a company may be of great importance to the general public, and certainly of importance to the MTA and the TA as we struggle to maintain safe roadways for everyone.
The lack of transparency delayed the CPUC's authorization vote twice, but eventually the companies did win approval.
We don't want driverless cars on the road.
Here we are again, San Francisco, about to have 4 people make a decision on whether or not the city is going to be pimped out by yet another couple of large tech companies.
They don't have the data that show clearly much of anything other than what they want to show.
So I urge you to put the brakes on. I urge you for a no vote. There's no need to rush.
Despite opposition from the public, the California Public Utilities Commission decided to allow both companies to charge for public rides 24/7 without restrictions in San Francisco.
The vote is 3-1. The item passed. The motion passes.
It's a historic weekend in San Francisco. People taking pictures as they witness driverless cars now able to operate 24/7, picking up paying passengers.
It's amazing. We love it. It's the safest thing. My kid loves it. Big lifesaver.
But safety came into question just days later. Within hours, things started going wrong for Cruz.
Just one day after winning approval, video shows a driverless car interfering in a fire response.
10 Cruise cars stopped together, blocking traffic in North Beach for around 20 minutes. In a social media post, Cruise blamed Outside Lands for disrupting its wireless bandwidth connectivity.
That really portends is in a major disaster like we just saw in Lahaina, or we've seen here in San Francisco, Loma Prieta, that these things will turn into 2,000-pound bricks on our streets at the precise time that we need to be deploying all of our emergency apparatus.
Oh wait, did it involve a fire truck?
Airbags are deployed in the Cruise vehicle for sure.
Yeah, can you dispatch a battalion chief? We've been involved in an accident versus a Cruise vehicle.
Last night, a fire truck hit a Cruise vehicle with a passenger inside.
ABC7 News reporter Leanne Melendez joining us in the newsroom now with the details. So, Leanne, do we know who was at fault in this case?
No, we don't. We're waiting for police to determine who was at fault here. In the meantime, that passenger, Larry, asked to go to the hospital last night. We don't know the person's condition.
As seen in this video, the fire truck was apparently headed southbound, but had moved into the northbound lane, something trucks do to get around other cars. Still, that doesn't mean they get a pass. It's still the responsibility of the fire department to make sure that that intersection is free and clear.
The fire chief is meeting here at City Hall with city officials and also with the mayor to try to figure out what do we do now.
But I can't talk right now. I'm going
but
to a
have we
meeting with the
determined?
mayor.
I know you are, but have you determined who caused this accident?
It's under investigation.
The next day, more bad news. The State Department of Motor Vehicles ordered Cruise to reduce its fleet of driverless cars in San Francisco by half. On October 2nd, 2023, an accident.
Now, ABC7 Live Breaking News.
And that breaking news, a Cruise self-driving car running over and hospitalizing a woman run on Market Street in downtown San Francisco.
Firefighters say the call came in around 9:35 this evening, and they tell us it was pretty severe.
I stooped down, and I started finding out whether or not this person, hello, you okay? Then the person started moaning. As you see, there's still blood here. The person started moaning, and then I raised up, and I started yelling, anybody call the police? Anybody call the police? 3 people said, no. Immediately, I put out my phone and I dialed 911 while still with the person and explained to them. And there's a body underneath a Cruise car that been run over by the Cruise, and the person is alive. The next day when I found out it was a woman, I'm like, wow, it's amazing that she's still living. Because that was ugly, you know, it really was ugly, you know. I even cried about seeing that, you know, it was real ugly.
The Cruise vehicle captured video of its onboard cameras of exactly what happened. It showed a human-driven car next to the Cruise vehicle hitting a pedestrian, throwing them in front of the Cruise autonomous vehicle. The AV slammed on the brakes, but trapped the pedestrian under the vehicle. What the AV did next, and how Cruise responded, led to a firestorm.
California is hitting the brakes on Cruise. The decision by the DMV today came shortly after a protest began outside the robotaxi maker's headquarters in San Francisco.
In a statement, Cruise said, "We learned today at 10:30 a.m. PT of the California DMV's suspension of our driverless permits."
Cruise is taking steps to get its robotaxis back on the road after California's DMV forced the company to pause driverless rides in October.
New at 11 now, the CEO of self-driving car company Cruise is out. Kyle Vogt took to X to announce his resignation tonight.
The criticism that Cruise faced is that it took them several days to give the full video that they had available to them of what had happened, and initially shared a truncated video which demonstrated that in the first instance this pedestrian had been hit by a human-driven car and thrown into the path of the Cruise vehicle. But because it was truncated, it didn't give the full picture. Really, it was that delay, that latency in being transparent with regulators, being transparent with the authorities and officials on what happened, that led Cruise to where it was, which was to have its permits revoked, and the dominoes kind of fell after that.
So when Mr. Alvarado called Ms. Kong, was he instructed not to verbally mention the pullover and the dragging of the pedestrian?
It's a great question, Your Honor, and there's no evidence of that whatsoever.
Are you saying that Mr. Alvarado made this decision on his own, not to mention the pullover and the dragging of the pedestrian?
No, Your Honor. He was relying on talking points. The problem, Your Honor, is that subsequently, Cruise as a company becomes aware of the pullover maneuver and the dragging, and those talking points were not updated to reflect the additional information. Those talking points should have been updated to reflect the new information, and they should have been given Mr. Alvarado to communicate to the CPUC.
Irrespective of what's happened, and inclusive of what's happened, General Motors is committed to Cruise. It's not going to kind of abandon them. General Motors knows that there is going to be a financial commitment to Cruise still to come. What has happened in the days following Kyle Vogt resigning as CEO is that there has been a restructuring where long-standing General Motors executives, including one of their very senior lawyers, have come into the company. Mary Barra, who's the CEO of General Motors, is now the chair of Cruise, and GM is kind of taking a fuller operational control.
That was certainly still true in the immediate aftermath of the incident. GM still publicly backed the self-driving project. In the wake of Kyle's resignation, Mo took over. We met with him 1 week after the accident and asked him this question about what happened.
Do you think that your vehicles at this point can predict something or can detect something that is beyond anybody's control? Without getting into details, you know, somebody who is, like, for instance, hit by a car and lands in front of your vehicles. I mean, could a human have done it differently?
Yeah.
Or do you think you're better at that?
We were very confident in our safety record so far. And every one of those incidents we simulate even like what the other human drivers that may have caused this incident. If our AV was in that situation, what would be the outcome? And in all cases we've simulated so far, our outcome by far was better. We would have detected that human. We would have stopped in the first place. Even though we've detected a person, or like again, hypothetically, without getting into any incidents, our EVs would detect a person, would hard brake, but you can't defy the laws of physics. At the end of the day, there is inertia, there is going to be like some collisions, and it's very important to look in relative terms.
what GM gets out of this is really important, because even if the distant vision of the Origin shuttle doesn't materialize, GM also is trying to transition to being a company that makes electric vehicles for consumers. And a part of being competitive with Tesla and Ford is offering advanced driver assistance and, to extent, degrees of autonomy through software, and being in partnership with Cruise helps them get there.
Since we did that interview at the end of 2023, General Motors has walked back its commitment. On December 10th, 2024, suddenly and abruptly, GM announced that it was pulling the plug on robotaxis and would no longer fund Cruise, completely shutting down its operation and closing a chapter in the quest for a driverless tomorrow.
You know, it's funny, like, what do we all do with our time in a vehicle once we get that time back, if we don't have to, you know, go through the monotony of driving? I fear that we're all just going to kind of sit there and look at our cell phones, but theoretically, I like the idea of getting time back. Is that quality time? What do I do with that time where I don't have to kind of continuously monitor the road and you know, commute? That holds some appeal. That holds a lot of appeal.
Is the autonomous future really here? Not really. You know, it's nowhere near what the promise was from Cruise and from others all those years ago. At the same time, like, there's been a lot of companies that have failed and given up along the way, or really, you know, altered what their goals are, or lowered their expectations. But we do have Waymo still running in San Francisco. You know, you can go on an app, request a ride, get in a vehicle like this one where there's no driver, go from wherever you were to wherever you want to be, and poof, it's done. It's simple. And I get the sense that San Franciscans are getting used to that.